with ADHD brains, we need such a higher and more consistent level of stimulation in order to focus, right? And so when you're chained to your desk watching a video, you're not getting that 10% extra stimulation you need in order to optimally absorb the information and connection. But if you're listening to a private podcast while you're doing the dishes, the absorbing information part of your brain is absorbing information and connecting with your brand.
Welcome back to another episode of Launch Your Private Podcast. Today we have Claire Paniccia. So excited that she's here. She's a business coach for online entrepreneurs who don't fit the mold, creator of the Neurodiverse Entrepreneur Summit, and the coaching program Brain Friendly Business, which is all about making your business work for your unique brain. Claire, so excited you're here. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit more about your business?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, I'm so excited to be here. So my business, I'm a business coach, like you said. So a lot of my people tend to be neurodivergent in some capacity, a lot of ADHD, a lot of autism, and also like spoonies, people with chronic illness and like energy limitations, and just also like creative rebel types, people who think about the world differently. Maybe a lot of people in my world are people who like their values go against like traditional online business advice. And that's something I talk about a lot in my content and in my work. That's me. So yeah, like you said, I'm the creator of the Neurodiverse Entrepreneur Summit, which is an annual summit that I host. I've been hosting for 3 years now, since 2022. And that is basically all about you can build your business, you can toss out the rules and build your business differently in a way that works for your brain, even if it goes against the usual advice, and still have a successful business.
Yes, we love that. Yes, we're
Yeah.
all about throwing out those traditional rules because, yes, all of it. So I'm curious, when did you first find out about private podcasts? When did you discover that? And when did you make the decision that, yes, this is right for me?
Yeah. I learned about private podcasting. God, I don't know what year it was because I have no concept of time, but I learned about private podcasting from a course creator, Elizabeth Goddard, and she started offering private podcast feeds of her courses. And I was like, this is interesting. But I was at a stage in my business where I did not have the revenue generation. I didn't have the cash flow to pay for something like that. But it was always for years and years and years. It was on my business wish list. And in the last couple of years, it's something that I've invested in to be able to offer to my people.
We love Lizzie. Awesome, awesome. I'm curious. So the dive into private podcasts, was that, I mean, clearly you saw the benefit as a student or as a consumer. So you were kind
Mhm,
of on the listener side of it and you're like, this is convenient for me. I appreciate this and I want to be able to provide that to my audience.
mhm.
As a creator, did you find that was using private podcasts was more in alignment with the way you wanted to work and how you wanted to show up and your energy? Because I know that's very important to your business and how you teach other people to show up in a way that fits them and their
Mhm.
unique style. So, did you find private podcasts were a good fit for you personally?
So actually, it's interesting. For me, it's actually not my natural form of creation. So my natural form of creation tends to be like presentation videos. I usually start all of my stuff as paid live trainings, and then I chop it up into course videos. And then so private podcasts for me is more about accessibility. Being Especially since I work with so many neurodivergent people, that's a huge portion of my audience. Um, Making sure that my work is available in multiple different learning styles is a really high priority for me. And so for me, private podcasts is like the number one easiest way to make my course content more accessible for people with different learning styles.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And based on that, have you received feedback from your customers and your students? And when they're listening to private podcasts, have you gotten any feedback or anyone that has commented on whether it's the ease of use or their ability to consume
Oh,
differently
yeah,
because of that?
absolutely. Absolutely. Especially with my summit. So for my summit, it's an annual summit, and I've always offered so in the first 2 years, I had a private podcast version of the summit in the All Access Pass. So it was behind a paywall. I didn't love that, but because of my budget limitations, that was all I was able to do. And I did get messages from people who were like, hey, this feels like weird that the accessible format is behind a paywall. And I was like, I know, I agree. I'm sorry. It's what I'm capable of. And everyone was totally great about it. Super understanding of the whole budgetary constraints of things. But this year, I was able to offer a free version of the private podcast of the summit. So it had all the same timers on all the presentations and everything. So each day, the presentations were available for 48 hours. Episodes on the private podcast would expire on that same timeline. It was fabulous. Thanks to Hello Audio's amazing automations and tagging system and everything. It was all super easy, but it was hella popular. I got loads of feedback from, I think one person even commented in the Facebook group was like, it's giving accessibility queen vibes. And I was like, I will take that compliment.
Mm, I love
But yeah,
that.
I got loads of positive feedback from people about offering the private podcast for free during the live event.
I think that's a good
Okay.
thing for people to note, especially, I mean, you get to choose, right, as the
Right.
creator and the host of whether you want to paywall something. And we've talked about it both ways, I think. I don't know. I'm trying to think if we talked about it on this podcast, but I definitely have recollections of me discussing whether or not paywalling private podcasts. We know it's a great, value add. And so a lot of times when you're looking at summits, you have a typical summit has you pay 47, 97, whatever, and you get to keep the videos for free or for all time and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And so there's got to be a way to kind of separate those two things. And so when you think about the structure of a summit and the structure of the offer, private podcast is something that you can use as one of those kind of separators, if you will. But what I love
Mhm.
about you coming to giving it for free, because I like that better if that's possible. And you
Yes.
brought up that there were constraints. It does feel really good because the goal is, right? Someone signs up for a summit, there's 40 people speaking. In no reality are you literally listening to every video. And so people are picking and choosing, and that's all great too. But then life happens or business happens or things happen and you couldn't get it live and whatever. There is something really special, I think, about offering people the ability to listen
Mhm.
because they can do it at school pickup or whatever on that same day that the video, might expire. And so I'm a firm believer in, if it's possible, making the private podcast not something paywalled, because it does really increase consumption, and summits
Mhm.
are like notoriously a thing where it's just they're hard for a student or a listener to actually get through, and so they just offer that like little extra ability or time that you can do it away from your computer, which is so important in these like week-long summits. So can we talk about how you structure your summit? And because I
Yeah.
think too, we've had a few summit guests on, but I do think, my guess is that yours might have a little bit different of an angle than others with the focus of your audience. And so I'd
Mhm.
love to hear how you structure the summit. It doesn't have to all be private podcast related, but just thinking about how you host that and where the
Mhm.
private podcast fits in.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that my summit is structured is it's usually a 3 or 4 day event, depending on the math. And this most recent year, I had 16 speakers, including myself. And there's the free Facebook group, which is super, super fun. This year we like passed 2,000 people in the free
Oh,
Facebook group.
amazing.
Wow.
So that's always super hopping for me. I don't know what lightning I caught in a bottle, but the Facebook group is always lit. Um, so that's open for 2 weeks, like as soon as registration opens, and is always really active. People are really always deeply conversing with each other. Community is something that neurodivergent entrepreneurs really need. And this year, for the first time, I ran ads, which was really exciting. And I also, let's see, so all the presentations are pre recorded, which is kind of an accessibility thing for me and for the
Mm.
speakers to add the live element. Historically, I've always had a live chat box for an hour. So each speaker will have like their chat box hour. That so you still get that like feeling of a live engagement without having to be on camera doing a live presentation. And it makes it easier for the private podcast. I can pre-upload all the videos, which is fabulous.
Mm.
And then anyone with the All Access Pass who gets the All Access Pass like before the summit starts they get all the videos right away on the first day, as opposed to them dripping out another benefit of pre-recorded. And then all of the presentations have a 48-hour timer. I do 48 hours. That's another accessibility thing for me because whenever I attend a summit or sign up for a free summit, I always miss the one presentation that I wanted to
Mhm.
get because it's a 24-hour timer and I am ADHD. So I
And
always do
new thing to
48
look
hours.
at. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And then another thing that I do differently from most summit hosts is so there's always the tripwire page with a timer on it and a hella discount on the all access pass. Most, like the industry standard is like 15, 20, 30 minutes. I do 12 hours on mine. And I do that because I don't like the idea of preying on people's anxiety, especially when my audience is neurodivergent people. There's a lot of overlap with anxiety and impulsivity for ADHD people. And
Mhm.
I want people to have the space to sleep on their purchasing decisions.
Yes.
So I always do a 12-hour timer. And I actually did from the first year to the second year. The second year was the first year I did that. And I kept the all access path structure exactly the same so that I could do a real data comparison
Mm.
of difference it made on my conversion rates. And it was like a 1% drop. It was not even that much. And then with the order
And that could
bump,
have been just like
Anything.
yeah,
also
I mean, and everybody
randomly
talks
that year.
about
Yeah.
like it's gonna tank your conversion. It's not gonna tank your
No.
conversion.
No.
You're just respecting people's agency and autonomy in their decision making. And
Which has to have some level of a positive, right? Like,
Impact. Yes.
exactly,
right?
exactly. So actually then with the order bump that I did not have the first year and did have the second year of the previous year's replays, it made up that 1%
Mm,
of revenue.
mhm.
And so it like literally was exactly a wash. So that was really cool and exciting to see.
I really like
Nice.
that. I like the structure of that. And I really
Mhm.
respect the decision to not have the pressure there. I think I have not been diagnosed with ADHD. And I just feel like it is a big turnoff for a lot of people,
Mhm.
whether you're, when you're purchasing something, especially things like you have 10 minutes to decide or 15
Ugh.
minutes to decide. And
Like
you're,
I
and
can't even read the sales page on that.
correct.
Correct.
Yeah. I may have to go to the bathroom. Like I just, like, how,
Yeah,
you know
or
what I
I
mean?
happen to be at the grocery store.
Yeah,
Yes,
or I
on
was
your
at a red light
phone.
or
So true.
something. It's so true, and so I really do respect that, and I agree with you. And swings in conversions when you're looking at single digits could be anything, and so I love that you're living your values through those choices. I just wanted to say that because
Thank you so much.
I think with especially with private podcasts, obviously you care about accessibility. You genuinely care about your people, and that comes through, right? And I think everyone gets to make their own decisions. If you are listening to this and you're thinking about doing a summit or you have summits, you get to structure it however you want to. I
Mhm.
think it's great, especially in this day and age and all the noise that is currently online, all the decision fatigue that everyone has, all of it. It's important to think about those things and not just
100%.
assume that we're creating urgency or the right type of urgency by putting that kind of pressure in place. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to
Yeah.
call that out.
I always say like some people have really strong feelings about countdown timers being
Mhm.
high pressure tools
No
or
matter what,
tactics. And I'm
like, if
like,
it's counting
Right.
it
down.
doesn't
Yeah.
have to like
Doesn't have
it's
to be.
just like any other tool.
Mhm.
Like scissors are really convenient, but they can be used to stab people.
Correct. Yeah.
Like, but we wouldn't call scissors a weapon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a weird
Yeah.
metaphor, but
It's so funny because my head was like, guns don't or what is it? Guns kill people, or guns don't kill people, people kill
People.
people.
yeah, yeah.
That's where my head went, and I was like, why am I being so violent? Like,
There's too
unrelated,
many
unrelated.
We're seeing too many ads right now. That's what it
Yeah, I
is.
know.
That's
Let's
it,
just use
that's
some
it.
ads.
There is
Ugh.
underlying anxieties around it for sure. Okay, so we're talking with a very experienced summit host. You've
Yes.
hosted the same summit a couple of times. Do you have any tips or thoughts maybe for someone who's adding, private podcast? You mentioned like you played with where you put it and stuff, but what have you learned over the last few years hosting a
Mm.
summit? It doesn't have to be private podcast related, but just generally.
Yeah, I've learned a lot because every year I see the nice thing about running the same summit annually is that I get to play and experiment. And I'm also very meticulous about data tracking because this is like the only thing in my business where I have high enough numbers where the percentages actually mean something. And so I get to do a lot of really fun experiments year after year. Um, yeah, so I've learned a lot. Automate, absolutely. Bring on support and help as soon in the process as possible. SOPs are your
Mm.
friend. I have actually a wiki now of my SOPs. I have the Summit wiki that my amazing VA made out of my SOPs that had all been in like really disorganized Google Docs. And I was like, please make a wiki out of this. She's okay. And it's so fun. It's covered in GIFs. But yeah, SOPs are your friend. Outsource from the very beginning. My
Mm.
very first year, I tried to do it all from scratch. I was doing it all from scratch using Summit in a Box. I had templates and stuff. So amazing. But it was still a lot of work to do. And I was trying to do it all in 3.5 months. And
Mm.
about a month before, maybe 3 weeks before registration opened, had a constant 24/7 stress stomach ache
Oh, that's horrible.
until I had a conversation with a friend who runs a VA agency. And I was like, I need help. And I was worried about bringing on help because at that time in my business, I didn't have the revenue to pay for the help, but I had to have faith in the cash flow injection that I would like a big giant wave of cash that I would get from the summit. And I did, and it was worth it. And now I will never run a summit without help.
I love how you
Hear,
bet
hear.
on
Yeah.
yourself. Yeah,
Mm.
that's important, I think. Yeah. And
Mhm.
also just that you prioritized your well-being and
Yeah.
yeah, because summits can be deceiving in depending on where you learn about summits from. Like I feel like there are definitely a few people out there teaching about summits that make them feel a lot easier than they
They're
are
why.
in
They're
reality.
why. They're not
Yeah.
easy. But it
They're
takes
not.
me 6 months.
It's that, and there are things there are choices you can make
Mhm.
depending on your capacity and where you're at in your business and all the things to make it easier. Sure, there are always choices that you can make. I love that private podcast is one of the choices that a lot more people are making
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
I think it makes it easier, especially for your audience to consume it. And one question I did have about your summit was, were you selling anything on the back
Mm.
end of the summit?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
does it make a difference? Did you notice your consumption rates because you offer the private podcast for free this last round? Did the consumptions go up so that the conversions for that back end offer could maybe get more eyeballs on it?
Mhm. So I did not launch something on the back end of the summit the first year. The second year, I wasn't planning to launch something immediately after the summit, but I ended up doing it anyway. And it was all spontaneous and disorganized. This year, I planned ahead. The plan was to launch something on the back of the summit. So the fourth day of the summit was like live hot seat coaching and a webinar about that like launched the my group program. And that was all planned ahead of time. Since this was my first year offering the
Mm.
free expiring private podcast, I was not very I would not call that optimized. I didn't optimize the private podcast experience to lead to conversions, but that is on my list for next year. So this year was more the experiment year, and the next year is the optimizing year.
Yeah, which is perfect. And I think that's the great part about what we get to do as entrepreneurs is that we do get to experiment and then just continuously iterate. And I think
Hmm.
that's
Tweak,
the
tweak,
best
tweak.
part of this. Yeah, that's the
Hmm.
best part of it.
Twiddling
I
dials is one of my favorite parts
Mm.
of the repeat summit host experience.
That's fair. Yeah. I'm curious with the all access pass. So they get to retain access,
Mhm.
right, to their private podcast as part of the all access pass. Do you drop an episode? So right before you're going to launch the next summit, so like this upcoming year summit, do you drop an episode into the previous year's feed to let people know the new one is coming or to promote the wait list or the next summit? Do you
That's a smart thing to do.
re-engage? Okay.
I was like, that's a
Just
good
curious.
idea. I don't know how, like, I don't think that would be just based on the data that I've seen in terms of usage and downloads. I don't know that I think that would be a like needle moving action because, after the first few weeks after the summit, nobody's really listening to that. But they have lifetime access, but they're accessing, or at least the majority. Maybe like a handful of people are, but
Mhm,
the
mhm.
majority of people aren't accessing it again. But that is a good idea. I should do that.
So the reason I'm at so one tactic that some folks, some summit hosts have used is to get people excited about the next year and like your new panel of speakers is they'll drop an episode in last year's All Access Pass, almost like a
Mm.
teaser episode, and
Have
then
it set
they'll
so they get an email
correct. They'll
when
get
a
They'll
an
get
new
an
episode
email
email,
drops.
and
about
it'll go
it
up in their app.
and
Yeah.
yes, so they
Oh
get the
goodness.
notification typically in whatever app they're using to listen.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you send an email, it also kind of re-engages and brings you top of mind again so that you can then create
That's
that
so
thing.
smart. Oh my God. I'm
We forgot to
absolutely
tell
gonna do
you
that.
we forgot to tell you we do coaching on this show.
I
I
love it.
We'll tell you what your next speed is gonna be, whether you want to hear it or not.
I love it.
I can't help it.
That's an easy lift. That's an
That's an
easy
easy
lift,
lift. I
right?
wouldn't
Yeah.
give you
Yeah.
the
Well, I
hard stuff.
forgot about the like get an email when there's a new episode. I
Mhm.
forgot about that feature. But yeah, that like the way that I was thinking about it when I was saying I don't think that would be needle moving
The
is like
podcast feed isn't
if they just
active,
have
so
to be
it's not.
checking
Yeah,
the
yeah.
feed, but if they're not checking,
No.
but forgot about the email thing. So
Mhm.
smart.
Yeah.
So
It's
smart.
it works really well too with folks that do live rounds of challenges or round like workshop
Ah,
series, especially if it's evergreen. Like they'll show up and do it live and maybe their people retain access to that feed, but they
uh-huh.
want to like re-engage or because not everyone buys the thing that you're offering at the end of a
Yes.
summit or a challenge or whatever your thing is. And so it's just
I
a
plan
nice
on
way
doing
to
a challenge next
re-engage.
year, so that's
Hmm.
great.
There you go.
The
Yeah.
next feed coming. That's actually something we ask a lot of folks. Do you have any feeds that you're sitting on or ideas of like private podcast feeds that you would potentially want to launch in the future?
Yes,
Besides the
I
one we
do.
just gave you?
Yeah,
Cool.
besides the one you just gave me. So I have one right now that I am it's only available to the people in my group coaching program, Brain Friendly Business. It's called Claire's Gold Nuggies. And
Cute.
it's basically snippets of gold nuggets that I have said in various places. So coaching calls or Q&A calls in other programs.
Mm.
It's just all of the gold nuggets I've said in all of the places compiled in one private podcast and tagged by topic. So there's 3 in my framework in Brain Friendly Business. There's 3 different primary categories, things we talk about. And I just drop 5 nuggies in there each week during the program. And they have lifetime access to that. I might use that private podcast in other capacities next year. We
Mm.
shall see. But another one that I have been sitting on and need to actually make is I have a free 5-day email series called Content Marketing for Neurospicy Entrepreneurs. And I've been thinking about making a private podcast version of exactly the same content so people can choose which format they prefer.
That's
Totally.
nice. I like that.
Love
Yeah,
that.
get some folks that might be, and I don't know. Sometimes I feel like it's a convenience and an accessibility thing. Sometimes I think it's
Mhm.
just, I don't know, time and
Mm.
friction and the availability of. We have a lot. I see for me, I have a lot more open hours outside of the time that I sit at a computer. Typically, if I'm
Mhm.
sitting at a computer, I'm on a call, I'm on a podcast, I'm meeting great people, learning new things, right? Or sometimes I'm outside and that's I'm not going to watch videos. So you can kind of reach people in different ways in different times. So I like the ability to create that option. That's really great. I think that'll work well.
I just had an idea while talking to you just right now. I want to, and I've wanted to for years, but next year I'm actually going to do it, is start an interview podcast.
Mm.
And
Cool.
it could be fun to have a like bonus content private podcast of
Yes.
like quick question, little like bonus content with each of the guests.
Yeah. Brittany
Yeah.
Herzberg just talked about that. Her episode dropped, I don't know, yesterday. And I
Yep.
re-listened to it because it was a fun one. And she, I guess in her old podcast, she had a public podcast. That's what she did. I think her guest had to teach something like a quick thing that was less than 10 minutes, but it was on the
Oh,
private
neat.
podcast version that they charged for. So
I love
we just
that.
had another guest too. Who was it? Oh, I don't think it's dropped yet, but where the public podcast, interview guest style podcast was actually just a private podcast. And that really flipped things on my head where she's like, I actually didn't want to launch a public podcast. It just felt like so heavy.
Oh,
So I decided to launch a public podcast, but make sure it was private. And she has guests on her private podcast that she requires to share with their audience. But they get affiliate money for sharing versus just this like give and take you have with,
Because
I
it's a
don't know.
paid
Yeah.
private.
And I was
Yeah.
like, and so she said
Aw.
everyone that subscribes to that is like super into it. And so whoever I get from someone else's audience is, I at least know who they are and I have their email address. And I was like, well, damn.
Fascinating.
I don't like it's so simple. Host a public
Yeah.
podcast, but just make it private. Okay.
I
Anyways, her
love
episode drops in
that.
a little bit too. So that could give you some ideas.
Yeah.
I know. I'm
Yeah,
like,
that
shit. It made me think, Nora, I had this idea for this show where what if we started archiving episodes, or that's one way, like start archiving episodes and they have to like go to the private version. We could play with that. The other one was create playlists that are based on case studies of certain topics.
Yep.
And so we talk about it and say, this is a lead magnet case
Ooh.
study. This is a summit episode. If you
That's
want to
where
hear
I'm
all the
at.
summit episodes, because
Yeah.
especially as we're 50 episodes deep, and I try my best to make the title say what it's about, but like also sometimes it just like it goes a couple of places and like,
Yep.
maybe a summit podcast could also talk about a lead magnet. And we actually put Claire's episode in 2 places. But you know how we were talking about doing blog versions of it?
Mhm.
Anyways, here we are coaching ourselves.
Yes.
This,
I love
this,
it.
this is what I love about private podcasts, though. It's like one of the few things in the like marketing world right now that's like innovative and different and
Mm.
has so many things that have never been done before that we're all just going to
There's
like
so many use
uncover.
cases.
Right? And so you could take these little tweaks, like someone being like, oh, yeah, I created a guest based private podcast. And I'm just like, I never even thought of that, like mind blown.
Yeah.
And anywho, sorry, I'm sitting here. I'm giving
I love
away
it.
all future Hello Audio ideas here. But yeah, I don't know. It is really fun. And I think for people like us, Claire, because we both are neurodivergent, I think when we can make things like this fun, these ideas that we have, well, Lindsay might execute one out of 20 or whatever. It's still like, how can I make that easy? And there's something about audio that actually feels way easier to do it than something else. Like I've had on my mind, like, oh, we should do a YouTube channel. Like I
So much
really
work.
want to, and we might, but like the idea of it is just, it just seems so heavy. And like, and I just look at all the things we're not yet doing with audio in our own company that is literally a host.
An audio company.
Right. Literally, we create these things. And, people always ask us that too. They're like, oh, are you doing this? And we're like, yeah,
No, but we'll add it to the list.
added to the list. But it at least gives me excited because I love the concept that it's like never been done before, or like only a few people are doing it, or it's like an experiment. That feels way more exciting. And I know I need that dopamine hit of like something different.
I was just gonna say that.
Yeah,
That's one of the
versus
cool
the
things
YouTube
about
thing, yeah.
like doing wacky things that no one's ever done before. Yeah, you might not have a guaranteed ROI or like a proven system or whatever, but that's the fun part. Like for me, running an online business, running my own business is kind of like a video game. And figuring out shit and trying to optimize my numbers and getting all nitpicky about the data, or just trying something new and seeing what happens is what's fun for me. I one time offered someone like a perspective shift on like their numbers. They were like, I have so much trouble like keeping up with my numbers. And I was like, why don't you think about it as like Tom Nook in Animal Crossing? When you're doing your bookkeeping, you're not doing your bookkeeping. You're getting like balancing the books.
You could even
with
play the music in the
Tom
background
Nook.
while you do
You
it.
can.
Exactly.
My husband listens to like Legends of whatever, like Link, what's that called? Zelda.
Oh, Zelda.
That's
Yeah.
his
Their
work music.
soundtrack
And I'm like,
is so good.
he loves it. I'm just like, it gets me itchy because I didn't play it a lot, but I feel like my boyfriend always played it, or like my brother. And I was
So
like
there's some-
sitting on
there's
this
some
side
baggage for
some
you.
weird, yeah. But I know that's super popular as people play like
Video game
music of video
soundtracks
games
are
on the back.
really, really great background music. I'm a fan of Brain.fm personally. But
Me too.
Me too.
I bought one of the lifetime licenses or whatever back in
Same.
the day. Yeah.
Nice.
Oh my goodness. That's actually interesting too. I never really
I'm
thought
dying
about
for them as a sponsor
Mm.
for this
Bet.
summit. I reached out. I had some email exchanges. They didn't bite. I'm going to keep working that though.
I think that could have been good for them. I
They
don't know what their
don't.
marketing or strategy is or whatever. They're
I don't
like
think they
a
really have. I think they're more focused on the science. Like,
mm.
they're more like the SaaS is just what funds their research.
Oh, interesting.
Oh,
I could see
yeah,
that.
I can see that.
Womp
So they're
womp.
like, because they just published their first like major scientific, like they were just published in a major scientific journal. I don't know. You probably got that
That's
email.
cool.
And I'm really excited to share it with my audience because it's about, at least in part, about like how their stuff is good for ADHD brains. I'm like, I will use this to use my affiliate link.
My favorite is like how it's like you hyper what do they call it on the you take the quiz and a type of music that
Oh,
you fill out and it like always makes me feel like you need intense music.
yeah.
Like you're
High
not
levels.
you're not okay. You
I
need it
already
to be
knew
really
that.
intense.
It's fine.
Give me the hard shit. Nora, is yours not say
Uh,
that because it does for
yeah,
me.
no, I actually really like the intent. I like the
I love
Okay.
the
intense
intent.
music.
I
So
always
Like,
use the high level.
Maybe Nora is undiagnosed over here
I'm
and
very possibly. But no, I mean,
you
that's,
can come to the club. Come to the dark
I would,
side.
I'd probably fit in really well in the club, especially as I'm getting older, for sure. But no, I think it's awesome because I mean, audio, if you think about listening to something like Brain.fm, right? And how different the experience is if you don't have like your earbuds on or something. It's not as effective. And so think
Mhm.
about your listeners and even the use of private podcasts
Mhm.
and the ability to consume and focus when people are in your ears versus if you were just like on a video and consuming it that way. So I think it also speaks to the science behind the intimacy of audio and the
Mhm.
ability to make connections that way and the ability for people to, I don't know, consume that content in a different way that really connects with them. Right.
Mhm.
And we all, I mean, obviously the things that you're teaching are very important. Your audience needs them. Right. And so I think it's just a really great way for them to get the information that they need in a way that's going to stick and really make an impact. So I
Yeah.
think it's really cool.
Well, and it's so important to be able to like meet people at whatever their ideal learning style is. Like
Mhm.
for a lot of ADHD people, my hypothesis is the reason that podcast works better for their brains is one, obviously there's the convenience factor, people with kids at the school pickup line, whatever. But there's also the this is what works better for their brain because with ADHD brains, we need such a higher and more consistent level of stimulation in order to focus, right? And
Mhm.
so when you're chained to your desk watching a video, you're not getting that 10% extra stimulation you need in order to optimally absorb the information and connection. But if you're listening to a private podcast while you're doing the dishes, your monkey brain has the dishes to do while the like absorbing information part of your brain is absorbing information and connecting with your brand.
Totally. I used to knit in my classes as at grad school specifically, not in college, but I used to knit and it was because like so much discussion. I loved it, but I also either felt like I always wanted to talk, which was definitely something I had to like pull back on in a class of
Mhm.
like 8, but just generally like listening and absorbing and yeah, so this idea of moving, right? And
Yeah.
doing
Mhm.
possibly doing something else. There's also the ADHD brain that wants to like multitask because it's if I'm looking at that pile of laundry, and this is why it doesn't work sitting at a computer is because I'm looking at my inbox. I'm looking at Slack. I see a message
Yep.
come through. How what is making me not click? And so by having myself be mobile, I can actually like maybe go do something. And like I know there's a group of folks that say like, well, I don't learn best with audio because my brain is thinking about other things. And I don't know if I've captured it. I always say to this that like those folks because I feel that too. But I'm like, who's sitting here absorbing literally everything that they've ever heard or watched or read before in their life? It's not me. And while it may feel like audio can be something that's easy to go do something else at the same time, I always bring attention to the fact that audio is the most likely to be pressed play for me. And that,
Mhm.
right? If the standard or the other option is not signing into the platform and
Yes.
watching the
Yep.
video, then I will take the 30 or 40% absorption because it's
Mhm.
audio. And so
Yeah.
there's this whole thing too with learning styles as a past professor, there's like in the education space, they basically say it's a myth and that there isn't actually learning styles, that people have preferences, but their
Hmm.
preferences aren't to what's actually most beneficial for them. So they call them learning preferences and not necessarily styles. And it's like there's a lot of people that'll be like, I need a video because I need to chain myself to do the work or whatever. And then they tested all these folks, and the people that thought they were one way, like still didn't get whatever. So the big thing with learning is like, yeah, you have a preference and that's great. But the reality is it's actually about like repetition. It's not actually the way it's being delivered. So for
Hmm.
many people, it's actually listening to something over and over again or seeing it in multiple ways, which I think
Mm,
fits learning styles, where it's like, I watched the
Hmm.
video and I listened, or I listened and I read the transcript. You're just getting repetition. And
Hmm.
yeah.
so that's like really where like core learning comes from. So, anywho, it
That
doesn't,
makes a
I'm
lot
not
of
saying
sense.
that preferences don't line up to learning better, but they basically found it does not have as big of an impact as people think. And
That's
so
fascinating.
instead, they tell themselves, I can't learn by audio, I can only learn by video. That actually may be a false story that you're telling yourself, and you're preventing yourself from even trying something different because you told yourself over the years that you yada yada can't listen to somebody. To be fair, going into a lecture and like listening for an hour and a half and not getting like daydream or whatever, that's hard to do.
That's a big
Anybody.
ask. Yeah.
That's a big ask. And so to translate that to like, I can't learn by listening, I'm just like, maybe. But like, also, what are you comparing it against? So, anywho,
Yeah.
my
Well, what
rant.
you were saying a minute ago, like the most optimal way to learn is the one that you're actually going to do.
Boom. Yeah.
And
Said
actually, I say
succinctly.
that in everything.
Yes.
Like the most
Hmm.
optimal way to create content is the way that you're actually going to do.
Yes.
Most optimal way to feed yourself. Feeding myself is really hard with
Yeah,
ADHD, right? And my partner
100%.
also has ADHD. This is a household
Why
where
this
food is
was
a
brought
constant
to me.
struggle.
Yeah.
And we're big on convenience foods. We're big on frozen stuff and I have canned peaches in front of me right now because that is the most optimal way for me to get fruit in my diet because it's convenient and
Otherwise,
it's not
it'll
going to go
die
bad.
in the
If I
drawer.
forget that I bought
Yep.
peaches, it's not the end of the peaches.
100%. I don't know how I could do it. My husband is not ADHD, so he takes care of
Uh,
me. So that helps. I highly recommend having someone paying attention to it if
you
possible.
have your universal designated, like
Yeah.
universe designated neurotypical.
Yes. Yes. I need him. I need him. But yeah. Anyways, this has been really fun talking about all this stuff. I
I
knew
love
it was going
this.
to be a broad episode, which because it's like people offer private podcasts in summits. But the reality is our experts come on here and they have a background in lots of different things. So thank you for sharing
Yeah.
yourself, you like how you set up your business, how you set yourself up for success, all the things. Because I think you're definitely one to follow out there
Oh, thank
in the
you.
space for sure. And we appreciate the work that you're doing. And we love that you're using private podcasts to help get through to your audience and to help them more. Yeah. So on
Well,
that
thank you
note,
for the work that you're doing by
oh,
making it
thanks.
easy to do that.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. So on that note, Nora, do you want to ask our favorite final?
Yeah. Favorite final question. And that is, if there was a private podcast with your life's musings, what would it be called?
So I actually have an evergreen email series that goes out once a week on autopilot called Claire's Random Thoughts.
Love it.
And it would absolutely be that.
Perfect. It's clear. It's
Perfect.
concise. I love it. Yeah.
Might I
That
Either
suggest
that or what we were talking about earlier of Claire's Gold Nuggies.
I was just gonna say Claire's random
Feels very
nuggies or
on brand
something.
for me.
Love a good nuggie.
There's
Oh, I
even a
love
little
it.
graphic of chicken nuggets
Oh,
on
of
the
course.
Oh, now
cover
that
image.
just makes me hungry. But
Yeah.
that's now, yeah. Okay. That's perfect. I love that.
Cool.
Oh my goodness.
Well, thanks for stopping by. It's been really fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool. We did it. And there you have it, audio heads. Another episode of Launch Your Private Podcast is in the books. I hope you're leaving today feeling even more ready to amplify your voice and connect with your audience in meaningful ways. The adventure continues in our next episode with even more insights, strategies, and inspiration to help you along your own private podcasting journey. Of course, make sure to check out helloaudio.fm to start your own private podcast. And remember, you've got amazing content that needs to be heard. So let's turn the volume up. Until next time.